So we all want closeness and we all want connection with other people, but sometimes we really struggle with how to get that and how to maintain it. And in fact, some people seem to be kind of allergic to it, and I'm going to address that here shortly. I want to do a diagram for you about whether the relationship you're in is healthy or not. Okay? So this is a kind of a simple diagram. It comes from transactional analysis. But one of the good things about transactional analysis is they had great diagrams. So we could think of a person as having three parts. So they've got this parent part of them, and that includes being nurturing, and it also could include being critical. And then they've got this, what they call the adult part of them, or the problem-solving part of them. Your values are up here, your critical nurturing, your problem-solving is here, and your emotions are here. Okay, so now you're in a relationship with somebody. And they have these same three parts. They've got a parent part, they've got a problem-solving part, and they've got an emotional part. Okay, so this is really simple, but it's also really powerful. So let's think about, does the parent part of you nurture the child in them? Okay, if so, that's really good. It's important to nurture the emotional part of your partner. Let me give you an example of me nurturing the child and my wife. Okay? When my wife is hungry, she gets hangry. Okay? So I called her up. I was out running errands this morning, and I called her up to see if she wanted me to bring her food. And I couldn't get a hold of her, but I brought her food. So that's the parent in me nurturing the child in her. Just one little thing. Okay. Does the parent in your partner nurture the child in you? Okay? If so, we got some good things. Can you solve problems together? Okay, if you can do that, the relationship's looking pretty good. Do you have the same values? Or at least can you talk about those values between the parent part of you and the parent part of her? And lastly, do you know how to play together? So this would be a pretty complete relationship, that all this is working, but frequently all those things aren't working. So these would all be pluses. So this would be a plus. This one would be a plus. This one would be a plus. So all those good solid things would be a plus. But, and I have never diagrammed it this way before, but let's just suppose that we have another thing is the parent in you critical of the child, and is the parent in your partner critical of you? So the red would be a negative, and the blacks blacks would be a positive. So the problematic stuff, like in those couples that I talked about, there wasn't a lot of nurturing going on. There was criticism. You're being a petulant child. Okay, that's the parent in him scolding the child in her. That's not good stuff, and that's what we're trying to work on so that you have the skills not to do that. So anyway, I think that this way of just kind of checking out your relationship, thinking about the importance of each of those arrows, and then really got to stop doing this. You got to stop that critical stuff because it's just not helpful. And it's not respectful, you know. I don't need a parent telling me what to do. My wife doesn't need a parent. She doesn't need me telling her what to do or criticizing her behavior. And since I've been in the mental health field, learning all to do that, learning all those ideas, I certainly do less of this. And I think she does as well. So people long for intimacy, but sometimes they act like they're allergic to it. It brings out not the best in them, but the worst in them. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 4 stories that I have about people that are struggling with staying in a positive connection and being intimate and well connected in a positive way with other people. The first one's probably the toughest one. This is a person I've known for a long time, and she had some neglect in her childhood. Her mother was a really bad alcoholic, and they didn't really bond well, although she had a protective father. So she was in a marriage, and that ended, and she was single for a while, and then she fell in love with somebody. She felt like it was the first time she'd ever really be in love, and he was a big guy, a strong guy, a friendly guy, and they got along famously for a while. And then the allergic reaction happened, and the fellow became very possessive of her and very accusatory of her, and he thought she was having an affair. If they'd go out to dinner and a handsome guy would be their waiter, he thought she was flirting with him. So that positive connection, and she was very, very faithful to him and very much in love with him. And yet this torment, this accusation, and it actually ended up with some physical violence, with him hitting her. And I think he had some psychotic stuff going on, even though I never really treated him at all. But I mean, you could think about that as really difficulty being close to somebody. She's very, very close to this guy. She was very much in love with him. He was sort of her ideal as a husband, and it just went to hell in a handbasket. So that's one story. Another story. This couple that I just saw one time, and they told me this story about she was playing guitar, and they weren't married, but they wanted to be. She was playing guitar, and he interrupted her and said, "Hey, can we watch TV now? I want to watch TV or play a game with the kids." And she got her feelings hurt, and she said that he had hurt her feelings, and that she would wish that he would just enjoy her playing the guitar. And he called her a petulant child. Okay, so here they are, wanting to be close, wanting to get married, and he's calling her names, basically. So that's the second story. And then the third story is a little bit similar. Now, I've treated this woman, but I haven't treated the man, don't know anything about him. But he's a very conservative guy, and he talks very conservative politics, and she doesn't express herself much. And if she dares to say something about the way she thinks about it, his response is, "You sure are argumentative today." And then she withdraws and backs out and shuts down and really ends up depressed. And then the fourth one is a guy that he's married to this woman. He's very much in love with her. He had a very violent childhood. I don't know what it was. I don't know him that well yet, but he had a very violent childhood. And I think he has panic attacks. He has panic attacks. And I've seen 4 or 5 people that have panic attacks that do this same thing. Instead of withdrawing when those fight or flight chemicals hit them, instead of doing what most people do, they withdraw, they feel like they're going crazy, like they're maybe having a medical emergency. He doesn't do that. He gets ramped up and then he gets aggressive. And he's even headbutted his wife several times. And I mean, she tolerates it. She understands that he just loses control, and then he's very sorry and falls on his sword, so to speak, and begs for forgiveness, and she gives it to him. So these are examples of people who are really struggling with how to be close to somebody, and we have some ways of helping people with that. It's not 100% successful, but it's as good a try as I know how to do. And one of them is this method of trying to reach collaboration. So let's think about this model that with these stories. Okay, so let's just start with the last one. Where is what model is the husband in? So this is how assertive he is, how much he wants to have his own way on this chart on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can't say 5. Okay, and this is how cooperative he is, and I define that as how much he tries to meet her concerns. Okay, so where would you think he is? Highly assertive and not listening so much to what she wants, okay? So that would put him in this more aggressive category. Self-concerned, selfish, angry, distant, and I could say, I win, okay? And how much did he try to meet her concern? Well, not very much, not very much. So he'd be low on cooperation and high on assertiveness, so he would be in this category. Now, I haven't met his wife, but she's giving in to him, okay? So she would be probably in this category, highly cooperative, highly accommodating, and probably afraid to be very assertive. Okay, so how could this help him? So one of the things I've done for about 20 years is I've led groups on anger management. And I told him, he says he loses control. And I challenged him and I said, I don't think you lose control. I think you're trying to take control. And he looks at me like, what the heck are you talking about? And I said, well, I want to give you a definition of anger that doesn't always work, but sometimes works. Sometimes it's exactly right, but it's not. It doesn't always fit every angry situation. And he said, okay, what's that definition? And I said, anger is a crooked attempt to extort validation. It's sort of like you're holding a knife at her neck and saying, you must submit to my will. So he went home and he talked to his wife about that. And she said, yeah, that's exactly right. I feel like you're extorting me and making me surrender to your ideas. And that was kind of new news to him. So rather than losing control, I think he it's kind of a bully. He wants his way and he exerts. He says he loses control. Well, he probably does after a certain point, but he's also demanding that she gives in to him and submits to his will. What do we got to do to get him to be different? Well, first of all, I think the most important thing in solving those anger problems is to learn to do three things or four things. When you get angry, you got to notice. And I said, what's the first thing you notice in your body when you're angry? He had no clue. Okay. And I said, okay, so let me tell you what I do. When I get angry, I feel these muscles, especially in my right arm, and tighten up in my chest when I feel angry. I said, I call those my slap 'em muscles. So if you were going to slap somebody, that's where I feel tension. So with that kind of input, he said, well, I feel something right in the center of my chest. And it's a tension right in the center of my body, and it just spreads out quickly all over my whole body. I said, okay, that's a cue of escalation. So you have to pay attention when you get that cue. And then you have to do three things. He says, okay, what are those three things? I said, you have to shut up. And that's the hardest one. You have to stop talking. You can't get your way. You have to give in to a timeout and let those chemicals, those fight or flee chemicals, get out of your body. And he's really motivated to solve this because he really loves his family life. They've got a bunch of kids together. So he said, okay, what do I got to do? I said, okay, you got to stop talking. You got to get some space and you have to calm down. And I usually say to people, it has to be at least 20 minutes. But for you, it has to be at least 30 minutes because you get so jacked up. So he agreed to that. I said, and then if you come back to talk about it and you're still jacked up, you got to wait till the next day. So he's very eager to do this. Now, he's a smart guy. He's read all of John Gottman's books on marriages and, how to get better and how to have a better relationship. And he's still headbutting his wife. So some of this stuff, I don't think you can read a book and solve some of these problems. I think you have to have a trusting relationship with somebody that you respect and think that they know what they're doing. And you have to really kind of accept what they're saying and believe it. So I think we've got that kind of a relationship, and I'm really optimistic that he's going to be making these changes. So his first assignment was to take a timeout. Even if you have to kind of make it up and you're not that mad, take a timeout, see if you can do it successfully. And not everybody does those homework assignments, but he did, and he came back and he was stoked about it. So I think this kind of a model, we're gonna use this. We've already talked about him being up here and how you get to, when you have a disagreement, how you use that four-step process that I've talked about. And that four-step process is setting a time to talk about it, listening to the other person's opinions, and using active listening, which I'm going to come back to later, summarizing what she thinks and how she feels about whatever it is, and then explaining your position, and then trying to see if you can brainstorm and collaborate. Come up with some ideas that'll try to meet something about what each of you wants and what each of your ideas are on, and see if you can get something that works for the two of you. So I'm really excited about using that with him, and I think that he's so darn motivated that I think he can overcome that aggressive impulse. Okay, so that's this guy here. Let me talk about this situation. Now, this is the one where he's very conservative, and if she expresses an opinion, he says, "Why are you so cantankerous today? Why are you so argumentative?" You know, I don't know that inviting this guy into this model would work very well. I just think he sounds too primitive, too controlling to go for something like this. So I said to her, okay, if your husband would listen to your opinions, would you find him more attractive? And she said, oh yes, I'd find him much more attractive. And I said, what if you told him that? What if you told him, if he listened to you, instead of telling you that you're being argumentative, if he could just hear some of your ideas, that you would be more attracted to him and you'd look up to him more and you'd be more sexually attracted to him. She said, that's all true. And I said, well, what if you told him that? That might motivate him to listen to you a little more. Okay, so let's talk about another idea here that I think is a very, very powerful idea. First, I want to tell you a little story. The idea that I'm going to talk to you about is from family systems theory. And I think it's a very good idea, and I think it's the best idea to solve this one, or to help with this one. So I want to tell you about going to this workshop with this fabulous guy named Murray Bowen. And Murray Bowen developed this theory of working with people that he called family systems theory. And here's the idea. I take his idea and put it in my own words, but I think that what he's talking about, or my way of understanding what he's talking about, is a family is like a mobile. And a mobile is a system. And if you take one part of that mobile and you put some tug on it, what happens to the rest of it? Well, the rest of it, as you can imagine in your mind, all those parts are affected by that one change. So I think the best thing she can do is work on herself. So I was in this workshop with Murray Bowen, and he was showing some videos of his work with people. And this guy stands up, holds up his hand, and he says, Dr. Bowen, you say you're doing family therapy, but in these videos you've showed us, you're working with one person. How's that family therapy? And Dr. Bowen says, I tell you what I do. I get the smartest person and the most motivated person in the system, and as they make changes, the whole family changes. Okay, so think about that mobile. Okay, so let's say there's two parts hanging there, rocking back and forth in the wind, and we take one of those parts and we change it. Well, that affects the other part too. And what happens is that mobile finds a new equilibrium. And that new equilibrium is based on her changing. So I think if I'm right, he's pretty primitive, not very open to stuff. But if she changes and gently starts asserting herself, I think that's the best way for them to find a new equilibrium and hopefully let him see some benefit in listening to her and accepting some of her ideas. I mean, they don't have to think alike to get along well. So, okay, so let's think about this guitar thing. Okay, so think about those four horsemen of the apocalypse that I've talked about before. But let me just review that quickly. So John Gottman says there are four, or I think 5 ways we can screw relationships up. Okay? One of them is being critical. Clearly, you're acting like a spoiled child. It's clearly critical, and it's also contemptuous because it's name calling. So those are 2 really toxic things. So we could teach him that. We could help him see that that's no way to get things going in a better way. And we could get him to ask her questions and listen to her rather than being so critical. If he asked her, so tell me what you'd like me to do when you're playing your music. And she would say to him, in my family, music was a way we related to each other. And it was kind of a sacred thing. When somebody played music, everybody listened and, kind of appreciated the music and did not criticize it. So I think that kind of a method probably would work for him because he's a really smart guy. I think he's really motivated, but he's doing a lot of that 4 horsemen of the apocalypse stuff. So again, just to summarize that being critical, being contemptuous, being defensive, or stonewalling, and then he adds one more, that if you're harsh, especially if you start things in a harsh way. And he certainly started things in a harsh way with her. He really needs that help, and I hope he gets it, because I don't think they have much of a chance of being happy together if they don't negotiate and solve that criticism. And then let's talk about the first one. I'll call her Sally. I think she just has to get out of it. I think that psychotic stuff, I think that's a big thing to try to fix. But I think that intimacy, he's so allergic to it. And again, I don't know him, but from the sounds of it, he gets so paranoid and he believes his own thoughts about it. I know that they are divorcing, and I'm afraid that she's going to give in and get herself really hurt by psychotic behavior. So, so what's the mental health help for her? protect yourself. That's a basic thing in mental health is, try to watch out for danger. Okay, so those are the stories that I was going to talk about. And so let's think about another John Gottman technique or idea, and that is repair attempts. Okay, so when things are getting escalated in a relationship, and you want to stop that escalation and calm things down, what he says you need to do is do a repair attempt. And it might be just to say, hey, remember I love you. Remember I love you. So let's see if we can back away from this, come back to it when I'm not so upset, and have another go at talking about this. That would be a really good repair attempt. Think about that repair attempt. We could think this whole collaborative model is a repair attempt. It's an attempt to get out of dysfunctional stuff and into problem solving. Okay, so that brings me to a really important idea. And that is, when we're upset, we're not very intimate. Okay, we're not very capable of being intimate, especially when we're mad or threatened. So that's where that timeout stuff comes in. What part of our brain, let me describe two parts of your brain. We've got an emotional brain back here where those fight or flight chemicals are kind of in charge of us. And then we've got a problem-solving brain up here, the neocortex. Okay, so when a person's upset, angry, in a conflict mode, what part of their brain are they in? They're in this emotional brain, okay? And where do you think we're trying to get to when we get to, let's see if we can work this out? We're trying to shift not only what's going on emotionally, but which part of your brain are you coming from? So one of the ideas of this model is, first step is, let's set a time and a topic to talk about it. Okay, so just having an appointment to discuss something probably is a step towards getting up here, okay? Getting into a problem-solving mode instead of an emotional mode. So one of the things that Murray Bowen says about making decisions when you're in this emotional part of your brain, when you're in this emotional part of the brain, he says if you make important decisions when you're fired up, you're going to have a pretty screwed up life. It's not going to work out very well. So a lot of the idea of therapy is getting to this part of your brain to deal with emotional issues instead of just reacting emotionally. So I've had two guys in therapy, and they haven't been, we haven't worked on this model, and they've had really significant tempers. But in my work with them, they have made a move from here to here. They both have. They were up here in this aggressive mode, and just learning how to talk about issues and how to problem solve. They've moved over here even without formally using this. So part of what we're trying to do in mental health is help people get into the problem solving part of their brain rather than reacting emotionally. And that's also where those timeouts come in handy. And that's where setting an appointment to talk about this comes in, because it gives you time to time out, time to take a time out, time to calm down, and get in a problem-solving mode rather than in just an emotionally reactive, angry mode. If you have comments or questions about any of this stuff I'm talking about, please let us know. Again, let us know if you want us to send you a PDF of this diagram. Click the link below and ring the bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can send this to you. It's also got the 4-step process for how to do this. Anyway, so mental health can't solve all these problems, but it's a process, and it's a process that involves trust. It involves kind of positive regard for somebody, listening to them. And I wanted to talk about the active listening. Like, think about how powerful that is. I mean, to put your own self aside and really listen and understand where the person, not only what they're saying, but what they're feeling about it. And seeing if you can get that to be accurate and practice it. And I think when you're in relationships, and you're trying to get to closeness, like, you got to be able to listen to the other person and understand really what they're thinking and feeling, and then be able to put yourself aside for a little bit and really hear that, and then not just demand to get your way, not just demand to win the argument, but to really try to see if this person you love, to see if you can get over here and problem solve. And there's a lot of bad ideas out there about how to get along with people. But these basic things like listening and problem solving and being respectful and being friends and doing activities together, like those are kind of time-tested truths. So rather than trying to win the argument and present yourself as some glamorous person, just work on being respectful and kind and collaborative. So, okay, if you have questions or comments, please let me know, and we'll see if we can't respond to them. And in fact, we're going to respond to some of them now. So we're going to respond to some of these comments, but I'm hearing that people in India are really listening to these YouTube videos and asking a lot of questions and responding, and seem to be really liking what we're doing. So hats off to you, India. Keep it up.
So somebody asks, so when they're talking about your first, the first collaboration framework video, they say, he's like, after watching this, most of the people will act like they have understood everything and will apply this in life. What about the mistakes people have done in the past? Are they willing to correct or even give a try?
Yeah, I think apologizing is one of those repair attempts, and repair attempts are a good thing. And I would even say with it, I'd like to get back in harmony with you. Let's see if we can work this out. I've made some mistakes with my wife, no doubt. And I remember one of the things happened a long time ago, and we were visiting her grandmother in Florida. And I wanted to leave so we could get to Disney World before dark, because we didn't really have a place to stay up there. I needed to do a lot of things, and I was kind of insistent that we leave at after we visited, and but I didn't really realize how much my wife wanted to stay, and she did really want to stay, and so she was pretty upset about it. We had a cool visit down at Disney World, and when we got back, I explained to her, if I had a do-over and I had known how much you wanted to stay there, we would have stayed there. So I want to apologize for, being sure that we left in a timely way and handled the trip in a way that we could find a place to stay that night. I mean, if I'd have known how important that was to you, that's not what I would have done. I would have stayed. We would have gone out to dinner with them. We could have gotten to Disney World after dark and still found a place to stay. And that's what I would have tried to do. And that apology of mine melted her. And so, yeah, I think apologizing, taking your ownership of when you've been too up here and not listening well enough to the feelings involved, I think that's a great start. It would be a great repair attempt.
All right. So the next question is, what if the person whom you must interact on a daily basis with refuses to make the appointment because, according to them, there's nothing to discuss? They've told you where they stand, and therefore there is no longer an issue.
Yeah, what quadrant do you think that person would be in on this chart? I mean, that would be a person up here, it sounds like to me, and you can't make somebody change, okay? I think the key to some of this stuff is to authentically be yourself and have your own connections, have your own life, have your own friendships, connections with your family, your own values, your own goals, and not get so tied up in a relationship that you forget about those things that make you who you are. So, I mean, all you could do is get here and invite them, but if they won't go, there's not a darn thing you can do about it. But that's where that mobile comes into play. So if you're working on yourself and you are authentically yourself, and you just stay there and invite the person over here, and if they won't come with you, I mean, you gotta think about that, because it sounds like you're not really on the same page. So, I mean, if you're comfortable with that distance and you want to give in to that, this actually, somebody being in this quadrant and somebody being in this quadrant, it's actually quite stable. Like, there's a lot of relationships that are based on this and this, but they're not very happy and they're kind of bored. So it sounds like that person's just dug in here with that self-concerned stuff, angry, distant. You can invite them over here, but you sure can't make them come. So,
And then this will be the last one for this video. Is this applicable for your framework? Is this applicable for someone who has a diagnosis of narcissism or sociopath tendencies?
yeah, I want to tell you what, John. So I went to a workshop. My wife and I went to a workshop with John Gottman. And we were out there for a week with a small group, maybe 20, 30 people. and we really picked his brain about a lot of things. So one of the fellows in the group stood up and raised his hand, and he said, what if one of the members of the couple is a narcissist? And I don't know how serious John Gottman was, but what he said is that he thought narcissism was just another name for being a male. And then he kind of laughed. And that something equivalent was just another name for being female. But what he was really saying is it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. What matters is, are they respectful to each other or are they not? So I think that what he's saying there is really good. And that is, you can have all kinds of diagnoses, but if you're still respectful, if you still listen to each other, and you have ways of solving problems together, he doesn't go so much by what their diagnosis is, it's what their behavior is. Now, you could say, likely somebody with that diagnosis won't be able to be respectful in a relationship. But that would be what he would be working on. Yeah, so I love the comments. I love the questions. So if anything I've said's triggered a question in your mind, please ask it and give me something to talk about the next time we do a video. And we'll try to answer it. And again, if you want a copy of this full chart along with the 4 steps to how to get there, please
Click the link below.
Please click the link below, and we will send you a PDF of this. Thank you very much. So we did something different today. We're actually at my home in a new room that I built on our house, an addition, and we're going to show you that room. And I think we're going to do more whiteboard videos from here because it's pretty darn comfortable and very pleasant. You probably saw some reflections on the whiteboard, and those were actually windows looking out toward the lake. So now we're going to show you that view out there. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. It's kind of an accident that I'm in the mental health field. I was 18 years old and working as a lifeguard, and the people from Menigers, which was a great mental hospital at the time, probably the best in the country, they came out to that lake where I was lifeguarding. Anyway, they interviewed me on the dock and basically hired me on the dock when I was 18 years old. And I needed a job to get through college, so accidentally I fell into the mental health field, and by working 5 years at Menigers. Now, I didn't study mental health stuff really in college. I was pre-med, pre-dental, science-y type stuff, which I still really like, that sort of thing. But Malcolm Gladwell wrote this book called Outliers, and he talked about 4 things you need to be successful. And the thing he's most famous for is 10,000 hours of experience. By the time I graduated, I already had 10,000 hours of experience. I just decided to go with that because I really enjoyed it, and I felt like I was pretty natural at it. I felt like I grew up doing it, honestly, because I'd been doing it, like I said, since I was 18. While I was at Menigers, they had fabulous training. They brought in the best people from the country to give workshops and seminars, and I was a part of that for all those years. They had training in cognitive behavioral therapy. They had training in hypnosis. They had training in family therapy, family systems therapy. So all of that stuff I was exposed to. And then when I graduated, I just decided that I would keep seeking out the best training that I could think of in the country. And I've done that. And I really have a passion to learn this stuff and now to teach it.